Three, two, one. Broadcasting live. 10th episode, Mike Mongo's Astronaut Adventures. Rah! I got the special disco lights in the background today. I am super excited to be present and live right now with one of my favorite human beings on the entire planet, the youngest person who's been on Astronaut Adventures yet, my great friend, Andrew Newman.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. It's really great to be talking to you and talking to all your viewers about what we're going to talk about today.
What are we going to talk about, Andrew?
I don't know, Mike, you tell me.
We're going to talk about students and space the reason I'm super excited about having Andrew on Astronaut Adventures today is because Andrew is one of those people that I saw when he was you become who he is today. And who he is today is a person who has pursued space all the way from being a high school student to being a college student to now being a college graduate. So I have a question for you, Andrew.
Go for it.
When did you first realize that you love space?
Oh, man. When I was 5 years old.
Really?
Yeah, no, actually.
I mean, me too.
Because I've lived outside of DC for most of my life.
Washington, D.C.?
Sorry?
Washington, D.C.?
Washington, D.C. And we are so lucky to have the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in DC. So from the time I was 5, every summer I would go multiple times to the National Air and Space Museum. And
who would take you?
My mom would definitely take me, of course.
Cool. You had a good mom.
I did, yeah. And actually that comes into play, later on with my space interests.
Is she still a good mom?
Oh, for sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
So you went to the National Space Museum?
Yes.
National Air and Space Museum?
Yes.
Since you were a little kid?
Absolutely.
So you always saw rockets?
Rockets. They had a little bit of like a replica of an American space station, Skylab. And they just had these beautiful, insanely interesting exhibits on space and astronautics. And I thought, I want to be an astronaut.
Wow. Okay, I want you to know. So I think that you're 24 years old, which means that you're our first guest under 25. And I want you to know that when I was you as a 5-year-old, I was really excited about Skylab because Skylab was actually in space when I was you as a 5-year-old.
Awesome.
I remember it. Astronauts, I remember that was one of the first times I ever saw astronauts exercise in space.
Wow.
They could run around in a circle. I don't know if you've ever seen, but because it was low gravity and they had a big container, they could just run around all the way around. Super exciting. So when did you decide, do you remember when you decided that you wanted to work in the space industry?
I do. So in high school, when I was younger, when I was 5, it was kind of a pipe dream, right? I knew that like a lot of kids wanted to be an astronaut. And I thought, we'll see what happens. And when I was in high school, I was following the progress of SpaceX because this was in the pretty early days of SpaceX. They had only launched, I don't even know if they'd launched the Falcon 9, like their main rocket right now at the time.
SpaceX is one of the big space companies that is different than NASA. It is exactly. Now. So you're saying when SpaceX was brand new.
Yes, right. So I was following SpaceX since then. And my 3rd year in high school, there was this big space conference coming to Washington, D.C. called the International Space Development Conference. And I said to my Mom, I have to go to this. I'm going to take a few days off of school. And she's like, cool, I'll drop you at the metro and then you can get into the conference. So my mom called in and she's like, yeah, he's going to be taking some days off of school to do this. I don't think the school was very happy, but great mom. So she pushed back and let me do it. And I remember very vividly at the conference, this was when SpaceX's Dragon capsule was docking with the International Space Station for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had the live feed of this video on the massive projectors in the conference room. And just the excitement around watching this historical step, because this was the first time a commercial company was docking with the International Space Station. And just the excitement from everybody at the conference about, hey, this is our next step into the future, right? This is how we get people into space, right? So you don't have to be with NASA. And I was so excited. I'm like, I want to be part of this. How do I become part of it?
Did it make a difference being around people who loved space?
Oh, absolutely.
When you were watching that?
For sure, right? And I'd be talking to people. Sorry?
Did it make it better?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you will remember that for your whole life?
For sure. I mean, it's been, 7, 8 years since then, and I still remember that moment very vividly.
Wow. I got to tell you that is a really important moment right now, because it's amazing that you would share this story with us. We both know that this month SpaceX is going to the International Space Station with human beings for the first time. So yeah. SpaceX, the Crew Dragon. So that was the Cargo Dragon, and this is the Crew Dragon that's launching on May 27th.
Yeah, it's come full circle. Here we are.
And I also want you to know that I was really excited when you're telling that story, because I know that feeling. When I'm around people who love what I do, it makes all the difference in the world, because if I'm around people who aren't excited like I'm excited, it kind of feels like a little bit of a rain, like a damp on the parade, they say. People say it's like a rain on my parade. But when I'm around people who love space as much as I do, it is like we share our excitement. You can look around and you see people's face and they're excited as you feel. That's the best feeling.
Absolutely.
So when you were in high school, so did that, when you went to me and you have seen each other at the International Space Development Conference. We saw each other. You came to the International Space Development Conference where I spoke last year and came and visited me. You came up on stage with me.
Yeah. I was a panelist for your panel.
You're the awesomest. Thank you. So when on your shirt, I think that there's a logo that's really important.
Oh, there it is. SEDS-USA.
So SEDS-USA and you and me are great friends. In fact, you used to be the chairperson of SEDS-USA.
I was. And actually, do you know how I heard about SEDS-USA?
I do.
So,
but I want to hear it.
At the International Space Development Conference, right, when I was in my junior year or third year in high school, I thought, this is awesome. I need to get involved. And so I saw somebody who looked like a college student who was just volunteering there. And I went up to him and I'm like, hey, like, how did you get the chance to volunteer here? And he's like, oh, I did it through.
I got to interrupt before. I know you're about to say, but I got to interrupt right here. You took the initiative and you walked up to somebody and you asked that question.
Absolutely.
Were you scared when you did that? Were you nervous?
Oh, for sure. Right. I was, how old was I at the time? 16, 17-year-old in this conference full of, most of them were, 40s, 50s, 60s. There were some 20 and 30-year-olds. And the person I walked up to, early 20s, definitely a lot older than I was at the time. I was very nervous, for sure.
But you did it anyway.
Did it anyway.
And then what did you say?
So I asked him, like, how did you get the chance to volunteer here? And he said, oh, I'm part of this student organization called SEDS, and they just put out a call for volunteers. And I made a note in my mind. I thought, I am a year or two away from college. When I get into college, I'm either going to join a SEDS chapter or start a SEDS chapter. True story.
And did you do that?
I did. So I went to Virginia Tech.
Yay, Virginia Tech.
Hey. And in my first 2 or 3 weeks there, I asked around. There was another like aerospace club, and I said, "Hey, is there a SEDS club here? Or do you know anything about it?" And the person there said, "Oh, we used to have a SEDS club. I think somebody is starting it back up. I'll put you on like the list to get information about it." I thought, great. So I got the invitation to like an intro meeting for not even like the club didn't even exist yet. It doesn't exist, but we want to start it. So let's figure out how to start it. And at the time, I think they just said right then, like, hey, let's just do an election to figure out, who's going to be the leadership for this club. And what did I run for? I ran for like something like the lowest leadership position I could, right? But I thought as a freshman, I wasn't going to get it, right? I was in a room full of people older than me. But I ran for it and got it. And so that was my first entry into SEDS and like being part of the SEDS family.
Wow. So there's there's a second time that you went above yourself. You went bigger than yourself, and it worked to your advantage.
Absolutely. And it certainly was not the last time.
You were nervous.
Oh, I was very nervous. I had to get up and like talk in front of all of these other students who had been in college for years.
Wow.
Right. And there I was 2-3 weeks into college. It was
nerve-wracking. Really brave. And then what? So when you joined SEDS, you went on, and like how you and I know each other is we met at a Space Vision conference at ASU. That's where I met Dr. Science.
Not ASU. At North Carolina.
At Arizona. At where?
North Carolina.
Nope.
No?
Nope. At ASU. And you know how I remember?
I've never been to Arizona in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I got it confused.
I think it was North Carolina, because you gave I think presentation on how to get a job in space.
That was the first time I met you? How to get hired in aerospace. You can watch that online. That was one of my favorite talks I ever gave.
Oh, it was a big hit. I loved it.
Thank you very much. Wow. That's where I met you. So we met at SEDS. We met at Space Vision. And that made a big difference in my life because you've been a big inspiration. I've been able to introduce people to the space industry and to working in space and to SEDS through introducing them to you. And you're one of the people that I've been able to rely on to inspire other people all along the way.
Thanks.
So, and now SEDS has high school chapters.
Love it. That's great.
So a person in middle school could start a SEDS chapter in high school.
Absolutely.
I think that there's even some SEDS middle school chapters, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
Yeah. So SEDS stands for the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. And you ran for that chapter, and then you became the chairperson of all the chapters in the United States.
Yeah, but getting from being this low leadership position at Virginia Tech SEDS all the way up to SEDS-USA, it wasn't a leap, right? There were a couple more steps along the way to get there.
Like, what were some of the steps? This is
so of course
This is an important question. I interrupt a lot, I know. I get really excited, and this is an important question, and this is one of the reasons I have you on right now, because of the students watching. They want to know how to get from where they are. I get that question all the time, Andrew. How do people who are in middle school or in high school message me on Instagram especially, how do I grow up to become an astronaut? Or how do I get a job in space career? And so you're saying that there's steps along the way.
Absolutely.
This is great information.
And they're not huge steps. They all build on each other. So I went to Space Vision for the very first time. It may have been my sophomore year, which is my second year in college. And at that time, so I had been in Virginia Tech SEDS for a year. And then the next year in college, the leader of our chapter had graduated. And there wasn't really anybody else who wanted to lead the chapter. And I thought, hey, I'll do it. So I ran for it, had to give a speech in front of a room full of people again. But by that point, I was a little bit more confident and able to deliver a better speech.
So each time you became a little more confident.
Absolutely. And then I was elected for the chair for Virginia Tech SEDS. And then just a few months later, I went to Space Vision, which is the SEDS conference.
For
and they had a list. Sorry?
Students put Space Vision on. Students put all of this on.
Yep, all student run. It's a very impressive conference for sure, for like students running and managing it. It's great. But before going to the conference, they put out a call saying, hey, we're having our board of directors elections, right? So if you wanted to be in the group that was running SEDS-USA, you could apply and then give a speech
all the
in front of
chapters.
Exactly, right?
All around the whole country, at all the colleges.
Absolutely. So at that time, SEDS was kind of small at that time. There were only, I think when I ran, there were only 20, 25 chapters.
There's almost 100 now.
I know. And so again, I had to write a speech and deliver it in front of people. Yes. This time, I had been delivering speeches for Virginia Tech SEDS in front of 20 people. But this time there was almost an auditorium full of people, right? There were probably 100, 200, maybe 300 people, watching me give a speech for the at-large board member position.
I've seen you nervous before.
I'm sure you have. And I was very nervous, but I got through the speech running up against, people with more experience than me and people older than me. But I think what got me elected were two things. I was very clear in my thinking when I was talking to people, and I was very clearly passionate. And it seems like such a silly thing, but a lot of the people who would get up there, you would assume they would want the position, but they just would not come across as passionate. And I mean, honestly, a lot of that is probably nerves and being very nervous to speak in front of people. Mm-hmm. But just that simple switch of, I am super passionate and really love this and want it, I think helped me out a lot.
So it came from your heart.
It did.
I always tell students, I say this all the time, that if you follow your heart, it'll never lead you wrong. Oh, I saw your math mug right there.
Yeah, you like it?
Yeah, that's great. You must be smart. I know you're smart. So,
I mean, I think a lot of being smart in like math and science and engineering, none of it comes you don't just know this stuff, right? You have to work really hard to be smart in math and engineering and science.
So I say that we get to work really hard because we're doing what we love. A lot of times people say we have to work hard, and if I have to do something that I don't want to do, it feels like I have to. But when I'm working hard on something that I really love, it's a get to. Like last night, I was up really late editing a video that's going to go onto YouTube and Facebook, that it's going to encourage students to pursue careers in space and astronautics. And I was up really late for a grown-up even. But it didn't matter to me because I knew that what I was doing was important and that my heart was in it. And one time I was at an International Space Development Conference in Toronto, and there was a 16-year-old who had a poster up. And as I passed by, I said, "That's a great poster." And he goes, "Thank you." And he goes, "How's your conference?" And I said, "Good." And I said, "How's your conference?" And he said, "Great. I heard somebody just told me that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life." And I stopped him and I said, "Young man, I want you to know that that is 100% the opposite of the truth. 100%. If you do what you love, you never work harder at anything in your life." What do you think?
I agree with that 100%. Right? When you do what you love, I mean, working hard at something, it's going to be tough, right? You're going to run into obstacles, you're going to struggle. And if you don't love it, right, it's very hard to push through that and get to the other side, whether that's, running for a leadership position for something or building a rocket, right? Without the love for that, it was all hard work to get there, right? Absolutely. But you need the love to enjoy the hard work, for sure.
I think it's the thing that pushes me. If I had to do what I did last night and it wasn't something that I loved, I might have gone to bed and left it undone. But because it was something I loved, I just kept on going. And this reminds me, the reason I joined SEDS, I was a grown-up. You remember, I was a grown-up when I joined SEDS. I went back to university. I did university for 13 years. I loved school so much. And I went back to school as a full grown-up to join SEDS because only students can join SEDS. And it was you on stage talking that inspired me to do it.
Awesome. I never knew that. That's great.
What's our
I'm
friend's
glad I
name?
could inspire you to do that.
So I was at the front. You were on a panel. Josh Jenkins. You remember our friend Josh Jenkins?
Of course.
Doesn't he work at SpaceX now?
No, he works at ULA.
He works at ULA, and Tori Bruno is a great friend of mine. And so,
Who's Tori Bruno?
say again?
Who's Tori Bruno?
Tori Bruno is the CEO of United Launch Alliance. I know you know who he is. Thanks for asking me because it's important. I say Jim Bridenstine runs NASA, and Tori Bruno runs United Launch Alliance, and Elon Musk runs SpaceX, and Jeff Bezos runs Blue Origin, and Gwen Shotwell. She's important. She's the president of SpaceX.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure who runs Boeing or Lockheed Martin. And there's also Sierra Nevada, and there's a new company called Dynetics. And so there's a lot of space companies to work at now. So when I was at a Space Vision conference, and you were on stage talking about something, and Josh Jenkins was next to me, and this is really important because I was thinking, wow, I should go back to school to join SEDS because I had met so many great friends through SEDS, including you, and people that were inspiring me even as a grown-up. And SEDS has been around at least 30 years. And so I said out loud, I should go back to school and join SEDS. And our friend Josh Jenkins was right next to us, right next to me. You were on stage. And he goes, "Yeah, right." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You're not going to do that." Well, you know me. I was like, I was practically enrolled by the time you finished.
Sure, you were on your phone like, I'm going to do it right now.
Because it's that fast now here in the future. You can enroll in college online really quick. So that's all very inspiring. That's what I am super happy that you came on the show today for our 10th episode.
Of course. So excited to talk to you and everybody.
I have one last question. I like to encourage. I know that you are working on your own projects now, and you'll continue to work with. And a lot of our friends are in the space industry. and you're going to continue to work on the space industry, do you think your entire life?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not going to work in the space industry your entire life?
Nope.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, so I don't know that to contribute to our future in space that you need to be working for maybe like a typical space company. Because if you think about colonizing Mars or colonizing space and sending lots of people to space, take, for example, you have kids in space. They need to learn somehow. And I don't think that how we teach kids on Earth is going to translate the same way to space.
You think we're going to teach, and when we teach kids in space, it's going to be different than how we teach kids on Earth?
I do, right? And I honestly think that how we teach kids on Earth might change based on how we do in space. Because in space, you probably won't have at first like the same number of teachers you do on Earth, right? So you're going to have to adapt and find new ways of engaging students and teaching students. And so I'm not working in education right now, but that's like one example, right? By working in education, you could absolutely impact space. And so what I'm working on today is making it easier to like work with congressmen and your elected officials. And part of that is because I want to make it easier for us to make the legislation for space that we need.
So you're working in space as a student led you to pursue the thing you love most of all right now.
Yep.
I totally endorse that. I 100% agree. When I was you, I wanted to be an astronaut. And then when I grew up, I decided that I would much prefer to be an astronaut teacher, to give students permission to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space. And to do that, we don't all have to be astronauts. We can do all kinds of different space jobs, and we don't even have to do space jobs in space. That's to me the most exciting thing. Is when I was you, I had one idea what space was, and now that I meet, or actually when I was way younger than you, so there's a place that you were once and that I was once. Like when you were 5 and then when I was 5, we were both that person one time. And we both had an idea of who we would be in the future. We imagined ourselves. And then we grew up and became who we became. I was once a 25-year-old, so I became that person. And then when I became you as a 25-year-old or 24-year-old, I decided that I was going to go in this direction with education. So I totally understand what you're saying. I evolve. I think that's really important. I think that people who don't evolve get stuck or frustrated.
I agree, 100%.
Cool. Wow, that's really important ideas. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike.
Oh my gosh. Andrew, I hope you'll come again on the show again and tell us about what you're working on sometime in the future.
Be happy to. Let's do it.
Thanks for inspiring me about space and my future.
Of course, Mike. Always.
Keep up the good work.
Bye, Mike.
Bye.